So, welcome everyone to our webinar discussion titled Five Confessions of Sponsorship Decision Makers. This is a real treat that I've been looking forward to for a few weeks now. We have David Almy with us today. He's the principal of ADC Partners and host of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. So go ahead and check that out. Good shout out there for Dave. We're really excited to have Dave on board today. He ran this project where he met with a bunch of sponsorship decision makers, and we're collaborating with him to share the feedback that he got, kind of a peek behind the curtains of what these sponsorship buyers are looking for. So we will be going over 5 questions that Dave asked these decision makers, and then Jason will be providing some awesome feedback and insights with his experience in the sponsorship world. My name is Jesse Thane. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Sponsor CX. Really excited to go through this feedback with all of you today. A few housekeeping items as well. This will be recorded and it will be sent out to you after the webinar concludes. If you have questions that come up throughout the discussion and what you're seeing, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat, and then we'll leave some time at the end of this discussion to kind of go through those questions for you. With all that being said, I'd love to pass the time over to Jason, our CEO here at Sponsor CX, and Dave Almy, and they'll lead the discussion, and then I can sit here coughing while I'm
Awesome. Thanks for toughing it out for us, Jesse. No, I'm grateful to be here. Thanks everyone for joining and being part of this webinar today. And so grateful to have my good friend Dave Almy, on the webinar today. And he is just a wealth of knowledge, as Jesse said. And Jesse mentioned that I'm going to give awesome comments. I don't know if I'll give very awesome comments, but Dave is going to be really the wealth of knowledge for you guys today, and I'm sure he'll ask a few questions, and I can give some insights there. But Dave has been a huge supporter of Sponsor CX and what we do here. I'll just give just a quick appreciation to him for all that he does for us here at Sponsor CX and helping properties and brands across the globe manage their sponsorships in a effective way. So grateful to have you, Dave.
I'm pretty excited to be here. I'm not gonna lie. When we talked about doing this, it was pretty much what time and what do we do? Thanks to you both for inviting me out to doing this seminar. Like I said, I think we've got some great information to be able to share with anybody. So why don't we do this? I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my slides. And like Jesse said, this is, we're going to, run through some information that we collected over the years. Please chime in with questions and enter them right into chat or however you want to do it. And we'll make sure we leave time at the end. But without further ado, let's jump into it. We're going to cover off both. The idea here is to give you all a clearer sense of how partnership buyers think, how they see the sponsorship equation. And before we do that, just a really very, very quick intro. Like the guy said, I've been the principal of ADC Partners for about 22 years now. And over the course of that time, had an opportunity to work with a number of brands, both in consulting them on how to develop their sponsorship programs and receiving proposals from properties and evaluating them based on that strategy, but also with properties and selling into those same organizations to try to get a better sense of how that works from the sales process as well. So that we come to this with a wealth of knowledge and a bunch of people that we've met over the years and have been able to ask them a number of questions. And that's led us to a lot of conclusions about how people on the buy side see the sponsorship equation. If there's one thing we've learned, I'm going to start it off with just a quick question. I'm going to ask each of you very quickly to, if you can, close your eyes. And if you could, as somebody who's involved in the sponsorship sales process, go ahead and pick what your superpower would be, right? If you could be a superhero and you could apply that power to the sales process, what would that superpower be? And if you picked anything other than mind reading, you're absolutely wrong. It has to be mind reading. And for those of you who thought invisibility, that's weird. Don't ever pick invisibility when this question comes up. Mind reading has to be the thing, right? Because the ability to see into the minds of the people you're trying to create these new opportunities with would be so hugely valuable, right? Right? You know, what they need, what they want, what they can spend, how soon can they spend it? I mean, that would be a pretty remarkable superpower to be helpful in this, right? But we can't do that. But what we did do is we did the next best thing. We asked 8 sponsors for insights on how they view the sales process. So we posed, like Jesse said, we posed 5 questions to these buyers. They represent both corporations and agencies, right? So both the people on the brand side who work for the company, but also the agencies that represent them. They represent a mix of regional, national, international focus, right? So they're looking at the sponsorship challenge from a very, very broad perspective. And we got insights from just about everybody within there. And they're collectively responsible for over $110 million of annual partnership buying, right? So pretty consequential, right? It's people you want to listen to. This isn't the 5,000s and the 10,000s. This is people who are looking at 6- and 7-figure investments. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we guaranteed everybody anonymity because we wanted to make sure that we were getting honest, blunt, in some cases, feedback wherever we possibly could. And sometimes when people put their names on things, they're going to, shave the edges off a little bit to sand them down a little bit to make things a little bit smoother. So anonymity proved to be a really valuable thing to be able to offer in this particular regard. Okay, and very quickly, here's the categories that we looked at. Everything from beer, major craft, which is a craft beer that has national distribution. Auto, and a couple of, like you can see there, are represented by their agencies. Here's why these particular categories we think have particular merit in this evaluation. The numbers that you see next to each one in red, that's the amount of money where they rank in terms of the category spending. So in terms of dollars spent on sponsorship, that's where these categories rank, right? Beer, number 1, healthcare 14, auto in the auto category is number 2. So like you can see, these are people who are very, very active in the sponsorship world. They think about this a lot. They're very engaged in it. So these are the kinds of people that, for you, those of you who are actively involved in sales right now, these are the people you're going to be talking to on a regular basis. All right. So, Jason, that's my lead in. Anything else you want to add before we jump into question number 1?
No, I think the only thing that I'll just add is this is going to be some really valuable information on how to approach whether you're a brand and how you should be looking at your sponsorships, or if you're in sales and you're looking about what brands are looking for specifically. So, Dave, you're going to highlight on some of these categories and all this, but I'm excited to dive in. Excuse me. And
you're so excited you got choked up.
I know. Well, Jesse's actually just getting me sick over Zoom here. So.
What? Oh my God, we got to be careful of the Sponsors CX office these days.
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
Here we go. We're jumping into question number 1, and we're going to start off with a bang, everybody. So here's we go. First, it's important to note also that these questions, as you see them on the screen, that's the exact way that they were asked to the folks that we put them to. Okay, so number 1, clearly the 22 emails, 5 voicemails, and 12 decks I sent aren't reaching you. What's the best way to get you to pay attention to my property? This is invariably where everybody leans forward a little bit and goes, finally, I'm going to get the answers on how to get people to respond to me. Well, the bad news here is, of course, there are no magic words. There are no magic phrases. But here's what you can do to get properties to pay attention to what it is that you're trying to provide them with. And you see some of those answers right there underneath each of the category representations. Getting to know the clients, doing your homework, show that you've done the research, demonstrate you get my business here, right? Okay, so the key here is you have to do the research on the businesses and categories that you're reaching out to. Going in cold and not having a frame of reference on what those categories or those businesses are trying to do is an immediate turnoff. Like, There is absolutely no reason for the sponsor to move forward in a conversation with you if you're not demonstrating that you have a fundamental underlying understanding of who they are and what it is they're trying to accomplish. And I'm going to give you a specific example about how exactly to do that. A really great case study that we know from a guy named Andrew Cohn, who works for the University of Florida. He's down in Florida, and he sent the following LinkedIn outreach to a potential prospect. Okay, so here's what this looked like. Hoping you can point me in the right direction. I'm wondering if a partnership between City Furniture and the Florida Gators makes sense as you continue to expand into Orlando and Central Florida. I've seen a little bit of your partnership with Orlando City FC and your Salute to Veterans initiatives. Really have enjoyed them. That's it. That is the totality of the outreach. Couple key things. Number one, not selling a thing here. It doesn't talk about the Gators or Florida or signage or digital or anything in this initial outreach. Number two, super short. It's just 4 sentences. But most importantly, he's demonstrating he's been paying attention to what it is they're doing. Here's a couple highlights. As you continue to expand into Orlando and Central Florida, in that half sentence, he's paying attention to the fact that they're expanding their operations into new markets in Florida. And in that second one, your partnership with Orlando City and Salute to Veterans. Okay, I see that you've been sponsoring other teams. And here's, more importantly, what you did with that sponsorship. The result of that effective, short, non-selling outreach is he got a response from them by the end of the day and had a deal done 6 months later. Okay, that's a really effective means with which to outreach to a prospect to be able to generate a kind of, okay, this person is paying attention to what they're doing, that separates you from just about everybody else out there selling partnerships. Okay, so that's a great example. I'm also going to follow this up with a quick video from Jen Rottenberg. She was the head of partnerships for Athleta. It's just a 1-minute clip. There's a couple of points that we want to draw out from there, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason when this is done with a quick question.
But also, just understanding, our pillars around women supporting women, inclusion, sustainability. Sustainability is a big one for us, and actually is probably the most interesting in terms of how we get at that through partnerships. So doing some research and understanding like what are the pillars that kind of underpin who we are, what kind of product we sell, who our customer is, but also, just.
Sorry, that slide got a little screwy. So a couple of things that Jen pointed out there that are super important, right? She talks about the idea of sustainability. Not a lot of folks in the sponsorship world approach a prospect with the idea of sustainability being important. But for her, understanding that that's a key pillar who underpins, like you see in that bottom sentence, underpins who they are and who their customer is, that's gold in terms of being able to make yourself distinct from all the other people that are reaching out to Jen on a regular basis. Jason, she actually told me also she couldn't believe how many people reached out to her and saying, hey, I've got this great male athlete I'd love you to sponsor, knowing that they sponsored female athletes, when she had to respond to them and say, what are you talking about? We don't even sell clothes for men.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you really have to do the research and understand what they're all about. And it doesn't take, I guess the thing is, it doesn't take a lot of work to do either. Like, I think sometimes like, oh, I got to do all this research. Yeah, you got to do some research, and you do have to do a little bit of work, but it's not a lot. Like when I sat on the brand side of the business for a decade with Mountain America Credit Union, I had the same thing where I can't tell you how many times I had reach outs where it was always talking about them and what they could provide all the time. When all day I'm thinking about what I need to do to help, fulfill the mission of helping our members reach their financial dreams, right? And trying to grow in specific areas. I mean, I love the University of Florida kind of outlined, the different, or was it UCF or Florida?
Yeah, Florida.
They had, how they had, they were focused on the growth. Well, at Mountain America, we were growing in Arizona and some of these other markets, and having someone be able to reach out and speak educatedly about what we're trying to do and how we're trying to, move the business forward. And talking about the business, it makes it a little bit more like, hey, yeah, I'd love to chat with you a little bit more. Or it may even be, hey, thank you for reaching out and just, letting me know about what you're doing and who you are. And yeah, let's grab lunch together or whatever it may be, right?
It's like such an effective way, because you have to understand, like when you were at Mountain America and the Jen Rottenbergs of the world, they're getting, Jen was telling me she got 12 new pieces of business outreaches a day.
You're getting it constantly. You're
constantly.
Always yeah. So it's refreshing to get something different, right? Where it's a little bit different approach.
And that's the whole point of this first question. How do you rise above 12 inbound unsolicited outreaches a day? This is how you do exactly that. If it's Athleta, you're talking about, I know sustainability is important to you. How can we make sure that we're doing that with our partnerships? If it's Mountain America, it's about helping people find what their financial security is going to look like and how you can help them do that. To Jason's point, it's not hard, but it's not easy either, right? It does take the work. You have to put in the cycles to be a curious student in everything you're doing related to the properties and the companies that you're reaching out to.
You just have to do it. It's not hard to necessarily find it, but you do have to put the work in to actually do a little bit of research on it.
Absolutely. All right. Question number 2. All right, here we go. As you've dealt with all kinds of properties for years now, all things being equal, what separates a good property sales team from a bad one? I think you're all going to see a fairly consistent theme pick up here fairly quickly, right? Understand what makes us tick. Understand my objectives. Put yourself in my job. Be responsive to my needs. Here's the thing. It is all about them. It really is, right? You've got to learn the client's business and what they need. We talk about it all the time from the standpoint of your biggest asset in this process is your curiosity. If you're not curious in this business, to be generally curious about the people you're engaging with, the company that they work for, and the category of business that they're operating in, if you're not actively curious about that, your job becomes a lot harder. So you have to be a voracious consumer of information on whatever category it is you're choosing to pursue at your particular property, because that information will come in so useful, both in the initial outreach, but as you'll hear from our next recording here, Adam Lippard, as you develop the programs going forward. And with that, I'm going to play another clip. This one from Adam Lippard. He is the Chief Partnership Officer at one of the biggest agencies in the world called GMR. Here's what he had to say on this topic.
The rights holders that are doing it the best are the ones that are coming not just with a perspective from their sports team, league, or property, but coming at it from the perspective of the brand that they're talking to, and coming at it from the standpoint of a partnership and not a transaction. You would be surprised, though, how many rights holders still come at this from the perspective of more of a transactional approach, but the ones that are bringing creativity backed by insight into the prospect, partner, or brand's audience and business are the ones that are really cracking the code the right way.
So there's a 2-parter here that I really appreciate that Adam shared there. I'm going to go backwards. That line, creativity backed by insights, is absolute gold for what it is you're doing in the sales process. Your ability to be creative on behalf of a prospect, and then using data and insights to back up why that creative idea is going to be successful for that prospect, that's really valuable to where these partnerships are coming from. And the second part of that is the idea of transaction versus partnership. This comes up a lot in our business. You've probably all heard the phrase like a transactional relationship versus a partnership, right? And wanting to avoid something that feels like a transactional relationship. This is fundamental to being successful here and your ability to position yourself effectively in your sales process. A transactional relationship is just that. Very, very, I need you for one purpose. In this case, it's I sell something and you buy it. What we're trying to get to is that idea of a partnership, right? Together, we're producing a solution that's going to benefit both of us. All right.
Well,
Another
and,
piece.
and Dave, let me just
Go.
add to that too. Like
Go.
you've really got to dive in and understand what their needs are as well too, to come up with that creative solution. Like if this is financial, because that's my background, I'll go there. If we really want to drive new checking accounts, or if we want to drive new auto loans or whatever it may be, like you're not going to find that out unless you actually talk to me about it first and have a discussion around it, and then be able to show, as you mentioned, the data around it. But then you're taking a lot of the work away from the brand as well too, and coming up with really creative solutions around what is most important to them. You know, as the previous person mentioned, you know, about sustainability, right? Like, and putting something around that to help drive them and move the needle. Like that is important. And you have to do, again, as you talked about, that research to be able to figure it out. And that's partnership rather than transaction. I had a rights holder reach out to me at one time, and they were like right out of the gate, it was like, I want to sell you this LED sign. And I'm like, it was like the worst, like reach out, because it was all about this signage, right? And I didn't need that at the time. I needed something that was going to help me figure out how to drive more checking accounts, you know, and that LED sign was branding piece, but it was not an actionable marketing piece for me. But none of the questions were actually asked at that point. So,
and it goes right to that next point, Jason, right? It's the idea of transactional selling what you have, right? I have inventory that I need to get rid of, like that LED sign. It may not be what you need, but it's what I got and I need to sell it. Yep. Versus a partnership, selling what you need. And that's not to say that an LED sign can't be part of what someone's need. The responsibility of the property, though, is to be very clear about how that fits into the larger objectives of what that partner is trying to say. Why is that piece of inventory in your proposal? What's it doing? What's its function? And then lastly, you know, with a transactional relationship, it's very clear when somebody is just trying to generate revenue, right? And look, sponsors aren't stupid. They know that you're trying to generate revenue from them. But if you can flip that to focus on their success being your ultimate goal, that's a change agent for your success as well. Always begin with that end in mind. Their success is your success, because that's what a partnership is all about. That's why you always lead, or should always lead, with the idea of I'll be successful when they're successful. That becomes a long-term partnership. And that's always obviously what we're shooting for. One second point that I'm going to bring up pretty quickly about what separates good teams from bad teams comes from the idea of making assumptions, assuming they know the category, assuming that I'm looking for the same assets. And I get it, right? We've been talking this whole time about doing your research and, you know, being able to share the information that you have. It's hard to sit quietly on what you think you know. But in this case, as marketers, and I know, Jason, you can speak to this too after I play this next clip from Pam Vitalis. I know most marketers, they're planning for the future. What you see in front of you is often something that was planned for 12 months prior. Their goals and objectives may have shifted dramatically looking at the next 12 months. So let's listen to this quick video from Pam Vitalis from Wells Fargo Bank. She's in charge of sponsorship and brand engagement. She used to actually sell for Learfield. This is what she has to say on this topic.
So you kind of want to make sure that you've kind of done your basic homework, right? And you understand, you know, kind of some of the things that are important to us by all the usual means, the websites, the media, press releases, you know, those kinds of things. But just resist the temptation to make conclusions based upon that information. Bring it up in the context of a question. How is XYZ that we read about impacting the objectives that you're challenged to achieve, Pam, through sponsorship?
Right. And so again, it goes back to the idea of assumptions. And here's how that can be different in this kinds of context. And Jason, you just brought up the idea of working for a financial services company. You know, you may see something about a current advertising campaign that's focused on opening new checking accounts, right? Okay, so they're advertising and promoting on billboards, you know, come open a free checking account. The assumption when you go into a conversation like that would be, hey, here's how we can help you do exactly that. The challenge in that is, like we talked about, in the next 12-month period, they may be moving on to, we're focusing on CDs, we're focusing on mortgages, we're focused on other stuff. So if you develop something that's all about how to help them open new checking accounts, may fall on deaf ears. So that's where an assumption would come in to be a problem.
Yeah, and I will also add that you're not sitting in on their marketing meeting. So from a financial institution standpoint, they might be focused on checking accounts from January through March. But come April, now they're going to the spring and now they're focused on mortgage loans, right? And so if you come into the assumption, you know, into April, May, and June about checking accounts, and they're actually in the middle of mortgage, that's why you'll see a lot of ad campaigns change with partners from a financial institution standpoint, for example, because throughout the year, it could look like that they're really focused on this, which they might be, but by the time a partnership gets in place, they might be focused on, you know, home loans or auto loans or whatever it may be.
Yep. And that's where exactly where the second point about how do you ask that from an engagement rather than from an assumption standpoint.
Yep.
Right. Okay, I see your current advertising campaign is focused on checking accounts. How will advertising priorities change going forward? And what channels do you see having particular value? You can also just see it, one's a statement, one's a question, right? And that's where you also can create this dialogue and start to generate more and more information that you need to make sure you're designing your proposals as effectively as possible, while also avoiding that assumption. I know, like Jason, you've been talking about, you see those kinds of things all the time when you're representing the bank, and I'm assuming from other perspectives as well, when you're also working with other salespeople, when you're doing that at Learfield too, or IMG College at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, question number 3. Okay, we get it already. We need to show ROI. If you can hear it, I'm feeling out a little sick of it, right? Oh God. How can properties help you do that? All right, here's a couple of key points that we want to talk about because this question, of course, will always come up. First and foremost is a real tactical thing, and it's all about KPIs. Okay, if it's not already in your vocabulary, key performance indicators should be. I personally love the idea of a key performance indicator. And here's the reason why. ROI is a very, very quantitative measurement, right? ROI for most companies, if I spend $1, I want at least $2, $3, $4, $17 in return.
That's called actionable marketing, by the way.
That is called actionable marketing. And as anybody in marketing who's being honest with you would tell, it's brutally difficult to figure those kinds of things out, right? So it's a challenging question to answer. But if you go to your partner and you ask them what their KPIs are, well, a KPI can be anything. It can be quantitative, it can be qualitative, right? A KPI might be, is the CEO happy with this partnership? And, you know, that is absolutely a legitimate KPI. A KPI can be how many people came. What's that?
How deep is the brand getting into the community?
How deep is the brand getting into? How many people came to the luxury suite to sit with your decision makers? How much foot traffic was generated for the stores? You know, how many impressions did the digital advertising get? So, you know, Jason, on the banking side, when you were working them out in America, I don't want to belabor that point, but we're talking a lot about sponsored decision making here. The number of KPIs that can be brought to the table for people to talk about and integrate into their partnerships can be vast.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that KPIs can be anything. So it's a matter of having that discussion with them, right?
And
I mean, it's a matter of having the discussion of what are those KPIs that they're looking at, you know, for a successful partnership. I mean,
and the best time to ask these kinds of questions are on the front end of your initial outreach to them. What does success look like? What kind of KPIs should we be concentrating on? Because if you wait to ask those questions until the deal's already done, oh, hey, hi, by the way, how are we going to measure the effectiveness of this? The ship has sailed, right? It's hard to
have a conversation.
re-engineer something to be able to get that in place.
And have conversations throughout the year to see if those change at
Yep,
all as well. Too.
absolutely.
And if
Oh
you-
yeah, periodic check-ins for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's one of the beautiful things about partnerships. They're adjustable. Just because something's in a contract doesn't mean that it's written in stone. If something's not working, you can always shift things back and forth from assets that might be better suited for either an existing KPI or a changing KPI. Everybody's business changes. You know, one of your strengths as a property representative can be making sure that your property is staying as flexible as it needs to be to cater to the needs of your partners. Another question about helping with ROI. This is an important one, right? So here's what 3 people had to say about this. Help us, show me. All these folks that you're working with, they need help. They need help telling the story of why this partnership is successful. And they're looking for you to help them share that story internally, right? How do you help them do that? Because here's the deal, right? A lot of these folks, if they're already looking for ROI reports, they've already made the decision to partner with your property. They see the value associated with that. They want you to be successful because that allows them to then go back internally, taking information that you provide them to say, hey, look how great this was, right? Jason, you didn't unilaterally get to decide how to spend money at Mountain America on different properties, but you sure as heck wanted people to respond back to you and say, hey, look at how great this was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely need to be able to show it back. Otherwise, you are just a budget item. You know, on there. You need to not be a budget item. You need to be basically, it needs to be part of the entire marketing plan and not something that you're like, I need to get into the budget. You need to already be in the budget no matter what happens. And when you do this, that's what separates you.
And in what might be the most perfect segue I've ever seen in my entire life, based on what Jason just said, I'm going to play a short video from Alicia Pope. She's the head of sports and sponsorship strategy at MGM Resorts. Here's what she had to say on this topic.
Now working on the brand side, I understand it. It's actually important, no matter the size of the organization, is that if you're the partner on the property side, ensure that you are giving your brand partner the weapons and the tools to build that case ongoing, to really immerse yourself within their strategy. And if they don't have one, help them build one. I think that's the other thing too. If they don't have one, help them build one. Make them look like rock stars. I'm talking about give it to them to the point where they could take your name off and put their name on. Because at that point, you're now you are in the trenches with them to a point where you're past just a budget line item now, right?
I mean, Jason, she literally just repeated back what you just said regarding you're not just a budget line item, right? You're not just an expense. You're effectively becoming part of their team, right? And that particular ability for you to transform the nature of that relationship from, I got to go spend money on property X to, oh, great, I get to spend money with property X, and they're going to be so great because of all the things they do on my behalf to help me look good. That one sentence, right? Make them look like rock stars. That's your job, right? On the property side. That's 100% the job, right?
Yeah, it's you have to. You have that's the only way that you have sustainable long-term partnerships is being able to, as she said, make them look like rock stars. That's the only way that you can do that, and you have to be able to show the value back.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go on to question number 4. What's the biggest mistake people trying to sell you a venue property make? Trying to sell a venue property make? What's the biggest mistake that they make? Well, this one's pretty straightforward, right? And you've probably all heard it 1,000 times, and admittedly, It's kind of kindergartner recommendation, but it's the key to success. Bad is when you talk about how great your property is. Jason, you talked about it earlier on about, the worst thing you can be when you're on the sponsor side is have a property come in and start talking nonstop in a meeting, because it just is so clear that this is going to be a transactional opportunity, not a partnership opportunity. 2 ears, 1 mouth. We got to use them in that proportion. In this next video from Phil Grieco, who works for Monster. Phil has worked for the NBA. He's worked for Wasserman, Mars Candy Bars. Now he's with Monster, probably one of the best examples of effective partnerships that I've ever seen. Here's his commentary on this specific point.
There's too many companies, and I learned this from Mars and even my Teambo days, sports properties, festivals, et cetera, that go in, they have an hour meeting and they spend 45, 50 minutes talking about themselves, their assets, their partners, what they want to sell you. And then they have 10 minutes to quickly go. So what matters to you? And that needs to be reverse engineered. You need to do some homework before you even reach out to them. You need to understand if it's Mars, it's probably primary grocery shopper as their target. It's mom and dad, but really mom that's controlling a lot of those decisions and going, what else can I learn about their business? Let me think about candy. It's seasonal, but obviously impulse. How can we help them maybe with continuing to sell more product, or with Monster, 18 to 34-year-old male, that blue collar worker, that's our consumer. How can you help us reach that consumer in a better way than we're doing today? It needs to be about that.
So again, that's great feedback from someone who's been in this business and really effective at it for a long time. I'm also going to focus on that last sentence at the end there. How can you help us reach that consumer in a better way than we're doing today? Here's the other thing about sponsorships. This is a zero-sum game. From the standpoint of these sponsors, there's not like new money laying around that they're just going to go find to spend on you. What they're doing is they're looking in existing budgets, right? They're looking at a finite pool of money that they've usually already spent. And in order for them to take a look at you versus something that they're already doing, you have to be very demonstrative about why an investment with you is better than it is with someone else, right? That's that idea of that zero-sum game. But going back to the point of how to structure a business meeting, there was a company that did a study of what a typical 1-hour sales meeting looks like. And here's how a typical one breaks down. About half of it is the seller just talking about their product, okay? Then comes another little bit about them making other statements. Then comes the seller asking questions, with just that last little slice being dedicated to the client talking, right? That needs to be flipped so that that entire idea of seller making product statements isn't that. It's you asking questions about how that prospect does their business, what their priorities are, who their markets are. Like Phil talked about, 18 to 35-year-old blue collar males. That's who he's going out. Your ability to take in that information, learn it, and adapt it is absolutely critical to your success. Okay. Now we're rounding home here. We're in question number 5. Our last.
Yeah, and Dave, we have probably about 2 minutes, so we leave time for questions.
Watch how quickly I go. Are you ready? What's the most valuable thing a property like mine can do? Here's what we're going to do. Look at what's underlined on this. The most valuable thing, and this should be pretty straightforward based on everything that we've talked about. We want to be a partner. It's what it all comes back to. Working towards that mutually understood goal. Sponsors want you in the trenches with them. And that's the true definition of partnership. So in summary, everything that we've talked about, we want to focus on that idea of partnership. Be a curious student of the people at companies and industries you're working with. That idea of two ears and one mouth, the ability to ask great questions and listen to the responses. ROI is a team effort. And lastly, in certain cases, sustainability is an opportunity that you can consider in the broader perspective of all those types of outreaches that you're doing. So that's what I got for you today. Thanks very much for your time. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we can start turning things over to any questions that we may have.
Yeah, awesome. I saw one come through earlier that we can get to first. It was from Christopher in the chat. And Christopher said, if the seller does not hear back from the initial well thought out email message, what's the secondary communication look like? Great question.
I have thoughts on this, Jason. I know you do too. Do you want to lead off?
Yeah, go for it.
So it's a great question, and it's the biggest challenge associated with our job. First and foremost, it's important to note that in the sales process, most salespeople, they give up after their third possible outreach, right? They just lose folks or move on to something else. Success generally comes after the 7th or 8th outreach. So there's a pretty significant delta between the two. I am a firm believer that you need to have a minimum of 7 outreaches using a variety of different channels to be successful. I've got one chief marketing officer that I work with who gets 700 emails a day, right? So even the most well thought out, cogent, terrific email in the world isn't going to get through to that, right? So think of all the different ways that you can reach out, up into and including smoke signals and carrier pigeons. I mean, whatever it takes, use the tools that you have to be able to do that.
Yeah, this isn't instant gratification. It's the long haul a lot of times too. So, I mean, I think a lot of times we fall in love with email. And I think it's the easy thing to do, right? It's copy the email address. Here's the thought out message that I have, copy, paste, it's out the door, right? Not saying that's bad. That's actually a good outreach to be able to have that. But to your point, Dave, like it can get lost in a CMO's like thousands of emails that they've got, right? And so and I was going to say the number 7 as well too. Like 7 touch points are usually the time when you can get there, but it has to be a variety. It has to be different. You got to pick up the phone. I know some people hate to hear that, but sometimes you got to pick up the phone. And I guess we don't pick up phones now. We just put them to our ears and hit send, but we don't pick up the phone. But yeah, we got the flip phones are even gone now. Now we just hold it up. But yeah, so you have to do that. LinkedIn, phone, email. But I think the other thing is don't hound them either, right? Make sure you pace it out and try and find opportunities to even meet them in person at an event or whatever it may be, where you can walk up to them, shake their hand, introduce yourself, put a face to a name.
There's nothing like the properties that you all work with to be able to invite someone out and saying, hey, look, I had a couple of tickets. If you want to come out and take in a game, I just love 10 minutes of your time just to show you around a little bit, that kind of thing. Whatever, be as creative as possible. Talk to your teammates about the different things that you've done, that they've done, or, ask other people on the webinar about things that they've done to be able to generate that kind of activity from folks. It's hard. It is the hardest part of this job, is following through on a lot of that kind of stuff.
All right, Jesse, we got another one?
Yeah, we had another one from Augusti in the Q&A. Augusti asked, what would an attractive subject line be like to get them to read the message? Now, there's obviously not just one subject line that will always work for everyone, but from the marketing perspective, Jason, I can chime in here, then you guys feel free to respond.
Yeah.
When I think about from the marketing side, when I send out marketing emails, there's 3 main things that I really pay attention to. And the first thing is personalization, right? So like, how do I make sure that this email stands out to this one individual, even if we're sending this email to a mass audience? So one really cool thing is you can call out the person's name in the subject line, right? You call it the company they work for, depending on the marketing tools that you're using. The second thing that really stands out is the length. I think, throughout my career, I used to think the more short and concise a subject line is, the better it'll perform. Data actually doesn't necessarily confirm that that's true. There's a lot of data that supports longer, more descriptive subject lines work just as well, if not better. So you can kind of flirt with that 50 to 70 character length, I think, is a sweet spot that I've found. And then the third thing that is just as important is A/B testing. So, try subject lines with emojis, try them, without personalization tokens, try them, with emojis at the end and the beginning, or without emojis, or without the last name and only the first name of the person you're sending to. Just trying out new things constantly and comparing the data. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do with your subject lines personally.
Yeah, I will add on. Those are all fantastic points and real tactical stuff to be able to consider in this. I go back to the email or the LinkedIn invite that I showcased to you all earlier, right? It's certainly longer than a subject line, but what are the lessons that you take away from that email that he wrote, right? Again, not long, 4 sentences, but the lesson associated with this is how in that subject line can you demonstrate that you understand what it is they're trying to do. In that particular case, the subject line could be how the University of Florida, how UF can support that client's move into Orlando. That kind of thing, right? So that's, again, in just a few words, okay, I'm paying attention to your business. It might not be right on the money accurate, but it's within the bullseye to be able to get them to think about, okay, well, this is somebody who's paying attention, might be able to help me do what I do because they understand my challenge.
Awesome. We had another question come through while you're chatting there, Dave. Andrew asked, I inherited contracts that are undervalued. How do I get that client to be on par with what newer partners are paying without damaging that relationship?
I'll start with this one on that. I think really anytime you negotiate, it's all about just using facts and data, and there's historical like rates that some people get into maybe 10 years ago, and others come in. I think a lot of times taking a phased approach helps with this, but I think education, you have to educate them on it without disclosing, really what other people are paying for things. You got to be, make sure that you have some confidentiality on what other partners are paying on things. But I think they don't know that as well too, right? So they don't know, because you're not out there saying, hey, so-and-so is paying this and so-and-so is paying that. You might come and say others are paying, the higher than what you're paying, which I don't even necessarily know that's even the direction to go. I think it's more about educating them on the growth that you've had. The more eyeballs, the more of the times that have changed, is their TV visible, as part of this, that maybe it wasn't 10 years ago. Maybe it's ESPN and it was on, some remote channel that no one had access to on Dish, and now it's different, right? So you have to just really educate the reason why, because you can't just say all of a sudden now the rate is this. Like, that doesn't work for a brand marketer. Like, it doesn't. Like, you have to be an educator and a storyteller to really get in there, and then be a good partner. Help them phase into it rather than just like a black and white, like boom to boom. Like, just be a good partner and help them phase into it. Be like, this is where we would like to be with it, but can we phase you there? And this is the reason why we need to get here, but let's help phase you there.
Jason, you took the words right out of my mouth. Look, we've been talking, so many points associated with the presentation we just gave are about the idea of partnership, right? And if you think about not just your sponsor partners or anything like that, think about the people that you have in your life who you value the relationships with. The fundamental underpinning of those is that idea of honesty and transparency, right? That's the people that you want to be connected to in your life, and your partners should be the same way. And so my process on moments like that is always just to be very, very transparent with them, right? Is to say, look, this partnership, we love it. It's been great. You're a great partner, but here's our challenge: is the partnership is terrifically undervalued based on where we are now. And I recognize that is not an easy thing for you to hear, but that's where we sit, and we want to keep this partnership going, we really do, but we've got to calibrate it to where we currently are and see what their response is.
And have a plan, and just have a plan. Just educate them on the why. If they don't understand, then they're just going off of, like, they just want more money, out of this. And it's probably true. That's probably the number one reason. But the second reason is that there's a reason why you want more money for it, right? And you have to really educate them around that. I think we got one more question on here, Jesse, don't we?
I don't think so. No, I know Seth made a comment earlier in the chat.
We do have one here from Seth. He says, this is a challenge. Let's see. this is a challenge that I have where clients say that they want a partnership, but are not as vested in this on their side. Sometimes clients want you to be a mind reader, but do not provide you with the information necessary to provide them with the best.
Look at
value.
Jose Tafoya stepping up there to answer the question in the chat. Get him on the
There you go,
presentation,
Jose.
man.
Nice.
A great response there. So
Actually, yeah, Jose, we'll just copy and paste, you know.
Yeah,
with
really.
that.
Just put my heels up on that one, Tafoya.
I
Taylor,
mean, really, Jose, that's a nice response actually to that. But I will just add that you've got to you just got to be upfront with partners, and sometimes you have bad ones. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. Like if you have a bad partner, you have to make a decision whether they're worth having or not. So that's number one. That's like one side of the spectrum. If the other side is they're good people, like you want to work with them, they're great, but they just aren't as vested as you would like them to be, then as we just talked about in the spirit of partnership, you have to have a discussion with them around that. And almost like a help me, help you, like type of mentality, right? It's like, help me, help you, like be better. And it's like, and I love what Jose had mentioned. There's a couple different things in here that you could provide of like, what are the things that are holding them back from being 100% vested? And can you provide that extra value, you know, to them to help them get there? And you have to look at that on a case by case basis, but it is another uncomfortable conversation, but you have to have it. And if they're good people and good partners, they'll have it with you. They'll have a good discussion with you about it.
I will say this as a way to add on to that. I work with a hospital system that's fairly significant, and we begin every conversation with the partner saying we don't have a ton of activation support and resources, right? So as you're designing this partnership, make sure it's something that can be activated efficiently, right? So going in, if I have someone come back and it's like, we've got events and tabling opportunities and da-da-da-da-da, I already know that they're not paying attention to what it is I just told them. So that's part one, design it so it can fit the activation capabilities of the partner. On the second end, it goes to Jose's point. What can you do to help them activate to be that partner and work on their behalf? That's gold. Right? Look what they did for us. They created this new logo for us, or they did this extra campaign for us, or they had their web designer create this email for us. You know, what are those things that are going to help you stand out? So it's not just a one-year partnership, but it goes on and on and on because they recognize the value.
Well, and we got one more question. This webinar ends in 5 minutes, so we'll be fast. Jesse, I know you got some anxiety here, but we're going to get through this quick.
Look at Tafoya. That's not the fever that's doing the sweat right now, Jesse. That's nervousness about these two idiots blathering on.
Two-part question for someone new to selling partnerships. What resources might you recommend in terms of getting to know this industry better and structuring partnership agreement? Is there any difference in your minds from selling partnership from a nonprofit? Dave, you want to start?
First of all, a fantastic question. I'll take the second part first. No, there's no difference about selling a partnership for a nonprofit than there is for like a sports team or what other kind of organization, right? There's some tax implications and all the sort of things that go along with that. But your objective stays the same. Like, how can my organization support the objectives of what that partnership is trying to do? Your challenge mostly lies into the fact that you're trying to create a distinction between a philanthropic gift and something that's more marketing based. How can they use your organization, whether it's something like Susan G. Komen or American Heart Association or what that's going to be to improve their capabilities? So in order to do that, you got to really dive deeply into how effective nonprofits can be to motivating specific people and specific audiences to action, right? To what it is they're going to try to do. Like particularly, women tend to be more motivated by men than philanthropic partnerships. So if that's an audience, that's, what are those products that are going to be that way?
And we'll leave it at that. So Jesse doesn't have an aneurysm.
You're good.
And Taylor, everybody on this call is a resource. Absolutely reach out and we will help you figure out other ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, feel free to add Dave, Jason, or myself on LinkedIn. Shoot us an email if you need to. We're happy to ask any other questions that couldn't get addressed today. Once again, Dave, thank you for the awesome content, and Jason for your awesome insight as well. this was a blast. I'm new to this industry and I was learning so many things as we continue this discussion. So thank you everyone for joining. We'll be sending out the recording shortly. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks
Dave.
everybody.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, see you guys. Talk soon.